It's April 11, Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform continues its operation. My name is Svetlana Shaprenko, and now we will be talking about the enemy UAV strike on Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Joining us online is Hryhoriy Plachkov, head of the State Inspectorate for Nuclear Regulation in 2017-2021. Good afternoon, Mr. Hryhoriy. Good afternoon. Well, the first question I would like to ask you is not related to Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. It's about the destruction of Tropilska thermal power plant. In your opinion, how serious is this blow for Ukrainian power grid and Kiev region, and what are the opportunities to mitigate the situation for the region and for the country in whole? Well, it's a thermal power plant that's a maneuvering capability. There was a lot of blocks there, and the strike was quite serious on Tropilska thermal power plant. And starting from 22nd of March, enemy continues inflicting strike on our power grid. I think it's quite a serious loss for our power grid. We have to renew it, we have to rebuild it, we have to try to rebuild the maneuvering capabilities, because the atomic energy is basic. It's loading and unloading is quite complicated, but hydraulic power plants, thermal power plants, their role is to soften the evening and morning peaks and to soften the nightfalls of consumption. So it's a serious loss for the power grid of Ukraine. Doesn't mean that there will be way more load on our nuclear power plants. Well, the load on the nuclear power plant is at its maximum, because this winter all of the reactors were working in the territory under Ukrainian control, but there is no perpetuum mobile. We have to load and unload the fuel modules. The reactors have to be maintained and repaired. So I think that the atomic energy, it plays already an important role. It's such an island of stability, so to say, and now there will be even more responsibility vested in the atomic energy technicians, because again, during summer everybody will switch on the air conditioners, the consumption is gonna grow, and as we are out of the autumn and winter peak, we have to start preparing to the following heating season. Yes, so Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, 4th of April there was an explosion. Then on the 7th of April there was another drone attack. So does it create any additional risks? Well, there are 5 reactors in cold idle and 1 reactor in hot idle in Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. That covers the needs of the nuclear power plant in terms of its energy consumption. Talking about the drone attacks, I think that it's a fake and a special operation by the unrespected Russian Federation in attempt to distract the attention of the global community from the crime committed by them against our thermal generation. They're currently calling for the session of the IAEA Council. I don't trust the Russians, and I never trusted them, and I will never trust them again. So talking about the nuclear safety, there is a report by IAEA that those shellings and drone strikes on the 6 reactor confinement did not impact the situation on Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The situation is more or less under control, if we can call it that. Well, it's difficult to call the situation being under control when it's occupied by the enemy, when the power plant is occupied by the enemy. Is there any maintenance envisaged, and if so, how will it impact the power grid? Well, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant does not produce any, it does not generate any electric power for the Ukrainian power grid. It only feeds from the Ukrainian grid to cover its power consumption needs. So if those lines will be disconnected or destroyed, diesel generators will be activated to ensure the cooling of the active areas of the reactor. So basically it does not generate any electric power, so it's difficult to say how its operation will impact the joint power grid of Ukraine, apart from the fact that it takes the electric power being fed by the Ukrainian power grid into it. Talking about the maintenance, I cannot answer you because the regulating control and management control of the nuclear power plant by our country does not exist. All the information available to us is the information provided in the press releases by the only international organization present at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, so which is International Atomic Energy Agency. So there should be a meeting of IAEA with relation to those latest explosions and attacks of the drones on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which were fabricated according to your opinions. So does the presence of the representatives of IAEA impact the situation on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant? Well, it's difficult to answer. I think that the mission of IAEA is a constraining factor to make sure that the Russians don't produce more harm than they can. Let's not forget that there's a lot of unrespected Russians still working in this organization. One of the representatives of Russian Federation is a deputy of Mr. Grossi. So I think that they are going to accuse Ukraine of all of the problems happening not only in Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant but all over Russian Federation. Do they influence, I mean the representatives of IAEA, do they influence in any way the situation in Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant? Well, again, they are a constraining factor that prevents Russians from producing more harm to Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. But on top of that, there's a lot of problems with cooling and normal operation of the nuclear power plant itself. There's a lot of problems with the personnel who are being tortured right there on the facilities of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and the satellite city of Enerhodar. So yes, the situation is quite difficult. Thank you very much, Mr. Hryhoriy. Let's provide an opportunity for our journalists on the floor to ask their questions. Victoria Nakonechna, Ukrinform, talking about the situation in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. In your opinion, how probable is such a scenario that after the occupation we won't be able to reestablish the proper operation of this facility? Well, I think that Russia has such a plan. They can do it technically. First of all, without Kakhovka reservoir and without its dam, it would be difficult to reestablish proper normal operation of the nuclear power plant because the water will not be sufficient for all of the reactors for their cooling. And I think that one of their ideas is to ensure the conditions under which we will have to either repair it for a long time or we will not be able to recommission it. Thank you very much. Another question?
Susumu Kojima from NHK, Japanese public broadcaster. Can you tell us how strong the reactor's buildings are? Do you think that these buildings are strong enough to withstand if there was drone attacks? Thank you.
Well, look, in response to your question, atomic power plants are not built for the warfare operations, either in the facilities of nuclear power plant or in its whereabouts. There are some seismic calculations or calculations that contemplate the fall of the civilian aircraft in the result of the capacity, but it's difficult to answer the question whether it will withstand the direct strike of a drone or a missile. On top of that, there is another facility near confinement which is important for the security, like diesel generators or high voltage equipment. This is why any damage of such systems may also produce very significant harm for the stable operation of the nuclear reactors. But again, the nuclear power plants are not designed for warfare in the facility itself or nearby. And again, that's the first case in the history of humanity when a country which is a part of international IAEA conventions and conventions on physical protection captures a nuclear power plant of a country which is another part of such IAEA conventions. So this is the case that is the first in the history of the humanity, and there is no universal answer to any questions, including yours, unfortunately. Another question. Андрій Святина, Ukrinform. The destruction of Tripilska thermal power plant. What are the consequences for Kyiv, for the capital? I mean the negative consequences. Well, negative consequences, first of all, there's a lot of grease for proper operation of the turbines. There's also a lot of cinder piles. Also, there's a lot of coal accumulated there. Kyiv has its own thermal power plants, and there are more powerful substations around Kyiv to ensure that the country, that the capital is not left without the electric power supply. But again, let's wait for the fire to be put out first, and let's wait for more or less official statements from from those who manage the Tripilska thermal power plant. I mean, from the management of Center Energo. So what are the consequences of the strike for Tripilska thermal power plant? Do we have any more questions to Mr. Hryhoriy? If not, I want to thank you for your answers. We were talking about the enemy strikes on Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform will be back in operation tomorrow. Thank you for staying tuned.